Hey y'all, welcome back to now what is part 3 of the shop tour series. So in this video, I've set up the area of the shop where I tried to get the most use, where we will, as you look into it, I took a motorcycle lift, and on top of that, I lay out my welding station as well as an area where I will set up my multifunction festool tables, so my MFTs over there, and my table saws over there, and so I have a lot crammed into a very small section of my shop. So and hopefully you enjoy the content, and feel free to comment down below if you've got any questions, comments, or ideas that you feel have worked well in your space. All right, so now hitting on kind of my next area. As I said, this is probably my most multifunctional workspace. Once I built this, it was rivaling the amount of time that I was spending at the main workbench. That probably still holds as my main spot just because of the fact that it's a nice flat surface. So if I'm using it for a desk or so on and so forth, that works really, really well. But especially when it comes to clamping things down, or I just need a quick hold of something, this has turned out to be just really kind of a fantastic kind of core piece. Sorry for the continual use of kind of, but this becomes a core piece of what I use. So what is it? So as I said earlier, kind of years of playing around with old vintage Vespas and Lambrettas, and then moving into a lot of time on motorcycles. Me preferring to do the bulk of my own work, not all of it. Sometimes time got in the way. I got a motorcycle lift years ago, so that I can handle pretty much all the stuff, and I've always liked working on things. So had the motorcycle lift. Well, then what happens is I back away from that much time on two wheels. Yeah, I still have an old Vespa, but the maintenance is pretty minimal, and it's not. I don't need this up here all the time. Second off, I'm just not. I tried to detach myself from the bikes and not be constantly having it, as my core hobby. So I'm just not out here working on this stuff as much. So what do you do with the lift? I could sell the lift, sure, right? Get, pennies on the dollar for what I paid for it. This was one of the ones I actually bought new. Got it on sale, so lucky me. But this was decade and a half ago or so that I bought this. So I could sell it, sure. What happens if, hey, my goal is son graduates high school, I'll eventually get back into writing. Me being me, I'm going to want another lift. So why take the hit down the road and have to buy again? So what I ended up doing was always leaving this here. At the point in time, I had my Jeep parked in here, and that, would stay all the way down to the ground. Jeep would be able to park over it. All was good. Really was not in the way. Well, then I started to look at how can I use this more functionally within the shop. Well, Harbor Freight, no affiliation, but Harbor Freight came out with these welding tables within the past year or so. And so I looked at them and decided I'm going to grab two of them. I'll bolt them together. So I've got this long workspace. It'll work well for my welding spot, right, where I need to be able to be in here. Nice open spot, space for the machines, space for me to be able to work. I've also able to adjust the height according to what I'm working on. So that also became kind of a unique piece, is I've got a welding table with adjustable height. And that goes directly on top of the motorcycle lift. Now, for some reason, I need to bring the Vespa in, and I can kick this off, slide it off. Sure, it's heavy, but it's doable. And I've got my workspace back on the actual lift to do its sole purpose. So that's where this has worked well, is being able to give me my lift, also give me my welding space, but also just in general another workbench where I can clamp and use it, really as a fixturing table. Now, an additional thing that comes really, really well with this is because of the fact that I could lower this down. Behind here, these are on wheels as well, so I had these on. I'm a big fan of furniture dollies because it's a cheap, easy way to get things onto wheels. It's going to cost me more in casters than to pop down to Harbor Freight and just buy a kind of a pre-built furniture dolly with casters already on it. So when I picked these up, I immediately put them onto furniture dollies so that I could move them out. Well, behind here, I have my two Festool MFT3 tracksaw tables, right? And I've got actually a video that'll launch here soon where I am setting those up here, right? And where I'm able to then continue to use this exact same workspace is I can lower this table down and my MFTs will straddle this, right? So I have them side by side, so I have a pretty significant workspace, but they straddle this work table by this lowering down. So in this one area, I essentially have a workbench as needed at any given time. I've got a welding fixturing table. I've got my motorcycle lift. And I'm also able to use this for my track saw setup. And I've got a lot of workspace around it to be able to get the wood in and do all the cuts that are necessary and have space for the tracks and all that piece. So that gives me a ton of flexibility within this one area, and that's still early on, right? I can also set this as well with, I showed you that, collapsible kind of workbench where I can throw plywood on and do cut downs on that. Well, I can get this to the exact same height as that, so that also works really well. Currently have riding behind it is a table saw. And so that again, I set that up so that this could even drop down as the same height as that and serve as in-feed or out-feed table, depending upon which way I flip the saw as needed if I were to be cutting a relatively long piece, right? Will I need to? Doubtful, but I can. And I think that was one of the biggest points was I can if I needed to. It is a function of the shop that exists based off of the way that I had set that up. But also as well, like I said, with my two MFTs side by side, and then this table saw living at the end of it, that also is the exact same height, not only as my collapsible, but it's also the same height as my MFTs, which then allows that again to serve as a in-feed or out-feed table, right? So a lot of functionality that exists in here. Threw a clamp onto here as well. Don't need the biggest one. I've got one over on the other table, but this is a nice kind of piece to have just as a quick hold for something. So that also works really, really well. I've also got some kind of unique storage underneath. So there's a gap that lives below here, and so I can have things like my welding rods. I've got some legs for my shop smiths, which we'll talk a little bit about shortly, and those are areas where it's like I don't have a great spot to put those, and that's dead space, so I was able to maximize using the space on that there. And then behind me, a couple of things, right? So over here to my right is just some rolling pieces, just, some, all these companies have moved over to like these, pack out style systems, I think is what Milwaukee calls them, no affiliation. And I can use that to store certain things. That tends to hold most of my woodworking stuff, especially for the MFT table. But it's on wheels, so that gets to move anywhere around the shop and has some awesome casters. So I could just shove it completely out of my way and it'll keep going until it bumps into something. So that works really well. Doesn't normally live in front of that door, but it can while I'm working. Normally it's tucked away in another area, but if I go to work in that area, this needs to have a home, and that's a great spot for it. I also have, which I showed in the first walk-around piece, is where my sewing machines are. So I've got a nice old vintage Singer 201 in there, and I've also got a nice Sailrite that exists in there. So both have their purposes, and they just fit into that spot. And then, as I said, I've got a beer cooler right below that, and so that really should be the center focus of this whole video and the whole shop. But that area works out really, really well. I picked up these really nice old vintage storage cabinets, which work good for holding just small stuff. And I haven't even set these up entirely. Like, as I find things that I need to put into there, they go in and then I label them. A lot of them are unused, a lot of them are unlabeled. but it works for what I need. I've got some extra tooling pieces that are in here that are all associated really with the MFT table, so it keeps them in close access for what I'd be using. Some parallel guides, piece that works with this domino tool and all that. So it's all very accessible, very close to the exact area that I would be working on. And then I said directly behind there are my actual MFT tables, 2 of them being stored behind there, and it fits absolutely perfectly and works really, really well. And you'd say like, yeah, but then you've got to move everything and then pull those tables out and set them up. Sure, that's the issue of working in this size shop. It would be fantastic to say either one, to have this 10,000 square foot shop where I'd never have to do that, or 2, if I really was only setting this up to be a woodworking only, then yeah, I wouldn't have to pull those out, set them up for use, and then put them away when I'm done. But I need to have more than just those able to be used. And the chances of me also having to do my welding table with a scooter on a motorcycle lift plus the MFT all at the same time, pretty unlikely, right? If it had to be done, I actually could make it work. I could take this down to one size, move it over to my main workbench, have the scooter over to here, and I can set my MFTs up over into this other area. Pretty unreasonable that I would think I would ever have to actually do that. But it's there if needed. So that's this area, which works out really well. As I said, there's a lot going on in this specific area that functions exactly as needed, and just took a lot of thought and a lot of trying to figure out where did I want to go with this to make this part work. All right, thank you for tuning in to this video. Hopefully there was some content in there that you found valuable on your side. I think on my end, it's a really workable space and a spot that I found myself spending more time than I had originally expected to. Moving from this into part 4 of the series is where I will double check my notes here. Yep, I'm going to kind of get into my mess area, the shop where it's all the tooling that just creates a disaster. I try to keep that tucked out of the way. So hopefully you find your way over to that video. Thanks for watching.